Okay, you are live.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Welcome, everyone, to the November 23rd, 2020 school board meeting of the St. Louis Park Public Schools. This meeting is being held virtually pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.021 due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So let's call this meeting, I called the meeting to order. Let's approve the agenda. First up tonight, we'll have Superintendents Report by Superintendent Osai. Our discussion items this evening are reviews of the 2021, 2022, and 2022-2023 school calendars. Then the budget update and preview of the Levy certification. School board listening session recap. We have listed on here policy development first reading 515. Then I am going to make a motion, however, shortly that we remove that from the agenda for this evening, and we're going to postpone that to a later meeting. Then we have policy development second reading 410, 413, 414, and 415. And then the consent agenda. And on the action agenda this evening, we will have approval of the second reading of those policies. Again, that's 410, family and medical leave, 413, harassment and violence, 414, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse, and 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults. Communications and transmittals, forgive me, and then adjournment. So again, I am moving to remove first reading of policy 515. Is there a second on that amendment?
Second by Karen.
Second by Karen. Laura.
Okay, Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Okay, I just want to confirm, Ken, are you on? No, okay, Director Morrison is not able to join us this evening, so that passes 6-0. And then is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved, Heather.
Heather, thank you.
Second, Ann.
Second by Ann. Okay, Laura.
Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Okay, that passes 6-0 as well. Thank you, Superintendent Osai.
Good evening, Chair Tomback, members of the board. This evening for my superintendent's report, I would like to highlight a couple of informational items connected to our safe learning plan. First, I would like to just start off by kind of recapping or covering some of the recent changes that have occurred connected to our safe learning plan. As you all are aware, at our last school board meeting, you approved to delay or postpone this implementation of Distance Learning Academy and full-day hybrid model for students in grades K-5. I do want to just mention at the listening session that I held last week for parents and guardians, this topic came up, and there were several parents that participated in that listening session that expressed disappointment that we did not continue to move forward with the implementation of Distance Learning Academy and the hybrid model, full-day hybrid, or excuse me, Distance Learning Academy for students in grades K-5, although we were transitioning back to distance learning for all. They specifically cited that there were, just concerns about making this transition later or delaying it, creating another disruption for their student. And they requested that as a school district that we strongly consider not waiting to make that transition until we move back into a hybrid model. So what I expressed to those parents and guardians that participated in that listening session is that I would be bringing this topic back to our COVID planning team, or the language that's used in the Safe Learning Plan is the incident command team. That's the language used by the state, but we call it a COVID-19 planning team here. So I'll be bringing that request back to the COVID planning team and really thinking about critically what will be the best transition to the full day distance learning academy. Recognizing right now we're currently in distance learning for all of our students here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. The second piece is that today we transitioned from early learning through fifth grade back in distance learning. And based on everything that I've heard from leaders that I've spoken to, things went smoothly today, and the schedules that were designed and implemented at each grade level are being implemented. 2 weeks ago, on November 16th, we transitioned back to distance learning at the secondary level. And I also want to just mention, connected back to these transitions, that in addition to some of the feedback that I received at the listening session regarding Distance Learning Academy, there also was some feedback, and I've received a couple of emails just regarding the prioritization of our earliest learners back in hybrid model as soon as we can. And what I expressed to those families via email, and certainly to those families that were part of the listening session, is that as we are able to do so safely, we certainly, in our plans in transitioning back to a hybrid model, we'll look to prioritize our youngest learners in that transition. One of the other pieces that emerged since the last time we were together is connected to Emergency Executive Order 20-99. And I just want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about that executive order and what that means for us here locally in St. Louis Park Public Schools. As each of you are aware, the executive order is really asking us here in the state of Minnesota for a period of 4 weeks to dial back certain activities to help slow the spread of COVID-19. So specifically what that means for us is that we will continue to implement our safe learning plan, which I highlighted on the previous slide. And it's important to note that, here in the state of Minnesota, with our safe learning plan, we've been given an opportunity to really work with localized data, and we continue to use our 6 educational delivery model considerations to help us in making determinations regarding the safe learning plan that we're implementing. Another piece connected to that executive order, which impacts us here in St. Louis Park Public Schools, is the pausing of athletics and activities. And as you all are aware, the governor at his press conference on November 18th paused all activities in athletics, just citing the connection to increased positive COVID-19 cases, fully recognizing the positive health impacts and unique developmental social benefits of athletics and activities, but wanting to really ensure that we can get these COVID numbers at a place that will ultimately allow us to be in person. One of the pieces that I want to mention is that I've spoken to our athletic director, Andy Ewald, and that although we will not be engaging students in any sort of, face-to-face interaction, that if this continues and this is extended, that we will look for ways to engage students virtually, similar to how we did last spring, recognizing that there are all sorts of, positive social, emotional aspects connected to students being able to participate. I do want to just mention that we ended up having to end the fall season early due to this executive order. It's important to note that boys and girls cross country, tennis, swimming, and boys and girls soccer were able to complete their full season, which I think that's very exciting, recognizing that was conducted in the midst of a pandemic. We were not able to fully complete the football season. The last game, or the first round of the playoffs, was last Tuesday, and we ended up needing to cancel that game due to positive COVID cases on our team here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. But I also want to mention that over 80 schools across the state were unable to play their final game of the season due to the pandemic. And volleyball also was unable to finished their regular season. They were able to play one more home game against Hopkins, where that was used as a senior night in a way to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of all of the senior volleyball players on the team. We are currently awaiting more guidance from the Minnesota State High School League regarding winter sports. And once we receive that guidance and direction, I will be coming back to you at a future meeting to share that and make recommendations regarding athletics and activities here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Osai. Next, we are going to do the discussion items. First up is the calendars. Director Cryer, our favorite conversation of the year. All the time. So yeah, take it away.
Chair, members of the board, superintendent, I live for this. What the superintendent has up in front of you is our current year calendar. And for those who haven't heard the story before, every year we bring to the board 2 years worth of calendars, next year's calendar and the one after that for planning purposes. The following year, we bring back the calendar that we've already approved for the following school year, just to make sure that there aren't any changes we need to make. And then we approve the second year out again. As we're looking at our calendars, we try to have the most contiguous 5-day weeks so that we break up as few weeks as we can. We have 185 duty days for teachers, 171 instructional days for students this year. And we try to make sure that the semesters are relatively balanced at around 85 days in each semester. So those are kind of the constraints that we look at. And then we look for, are there any school days that are falling on religious holidays for our major school and student or employee and student groups. So as we try to balance all those configurations, we bring a calendar together. And this year's calendar is kind of a basic calendar, 5 days of opening week. We did make an adjustment in November and moved our December Professional Development Day on the election day, just because of all of the activity that could be happening on the election day. We moved that to cover that, and that went, I think, fairly well. There's a shortened winter break, meaning less than 10 days, so that at the end of the year, kids could get out by June 10th, and teachers were done on the 11th. So that's this year's calendar. So the next year's calendar, if you could move one forward, is similar, except in an unusual confluence of Rosh Hashanah being earlier than it's ever been, and Labor Day being a little bit later. The first day of school would have fallen on Rosh Hashanah, and the board and the cabinet asked us to look for an option where the first day of school wouldn't fall on Rosh Hashanah. So we took a December Professional Development Day and moved it to the day after Labor Day. And so we unusually have a 6-day opening week that year, but then everything else pretty much flows consistently. One of the things that we may come back to the board in December or the first meeting in January is looking at that March Professional Development Day, which shows up in blue, and potentially, because that's a long way to go without a full District Professional Development Day, moving that back to maybe February 4th or December 3rd or 10th. And so we're working with our instructional groups to talk about whether that may make more sense for professional development than having that all PD day in March. So we may come back with that for next year, but that's the only change I think at this time we were looking at. You take us to the next year. So now we're out another year, and this year, as we look forward, it would go back to a 5-day opening week, and then we'd start school right after Labor Day again. There is Christmas and New Year's happen to fall on Sunday. So when New Year's falls on Sunday, you can't have school on Monday because that's the federal holiday. So we have to have Monday the 2nd be a holiday day off, and so our winter break is going to look like, at least the recommended winter break would start on the Thursday before Christmas and run up through January 2nd, if I can see that correctly. Everything else seems to be normal, except if you'd go to the next slide. Once again, we were looking at, and we're still talking with our teachers and paraprofessionals on whether or not to move that March PD day back to February, maybe moving it to December. What if we put it in on October 20th, which historically would be the first day of MEA. And so we're meeting with teachers and paraprofessionals and our other employee groups in our meet and confer sessions and talking about what calendar is the best instructional tool for us to bring forward to the board. I don't know, Superintendent, did you have any comments?
Sorry about that. No, I don't have any comments at this time.
I was just hoping I wasn't on mute that whole time and I'd have to do it again. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
I have one little question, and that's just a reminder for us on next year's calendar that we have that late start due to the Rosh Hashanah holiday, but we weren't able to look at starting before Labor Day because of construction. Is that my recollection?
I believe that was true.
Okay.
Do we know, Patricia, I'm not sure if you would know the answer to this, about whether, because we don't have students in the building as much this year, whether there's going to be any relative or significant construction timeline changes that might make that an option to start before Labor Day next year?
No, I don't think so, unless we learn something later in the, after winter break that tells us kids won't be back next year. I don't think that there's enough certainty that we could get started in any significant way, because once we're in the summer.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Anyone else?
I just really appreciate all the effort, Rick, that you put into this with your team and with the staff to come up with the best possible options. I know it's tedious. I know we joke about it. I know that we can guarantee we don't please everybody, but I do appreciate all the effort that goes into making this as balanced as possible. So thank you.
Thanks.
I would obviously echo that, Rick, but I also wanted to maybe put in a plug. You mentioned the idea that perhaps this professional development, one of the professional development days for the 2022-23 school year might happen that first Thursday of MEA, or might otherwise be moved from that Friday, December 2nd. I think I've always kind of noticed, and I've heard from families, that basically from MEA to winter break, sometimes that whole period can feel pretty disjointed because you get 3 days off for Thanksgiving, and then you get a professional development day in the middle, and then you've got the end, you get out for winter break, and there's obviously MEA before that, and end of the quarter grading day is usually off in that period of time too. So there aren't usually a whole lot of weeks that run from that stretch of time in the fall. So I know that the teachers rightly feel very protective of the MEA time, which I completely understand and respect, but I would encourage us to consider any possibilities that would allow for a little more continuity in the schedule in the fall. I don't know if there's any other board members who want to comment on that or point out something I'm not considering. But generally speaking, I think that there can feel like a lot of breaks during that time that I'm wondering if we could alleviate. Maybe that's just me, but anyway, thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Laura.
This is Laura McClendon. about the day that Chair Tombeck was talking about, the 20th, even if that was a teacher professional development day, students would still have it off, correct?
Correct.
Like, okay. And then I'm going to put in the opposite plug, Chair Tombeck, as a teacher. Those first 6 weeks of school are kind of a, it's a wild ride. And that break is really nice to have because it allows, as much as I wish that I actually myself as a teacher took those 2 days off and went or did something, a lot of us actually use that time to reflect on everything that we learned about our students. So it's kind of this time to really take a break and pause. So I'm going to put in a plug that don't take that away from the teachers. So although I can definitely see Chair Tombeck's point, because that time between fall break and then winter break is very disjointed sometimes.
So there you go. You can't even make everybody on the board happy, Rick. I don't know how you're.
No, I know, and I can't, I can't figure out why when MEA went to 1 day conference, they kept it on Thursday. So we're still working with them on potentially moving that to a Friday. However, they did say when they had this year's MEA virtually, it was better attended than it had been in years. So there was professional development on MEA.
Mary, can I
have
jump in with a
go ahead.
question?
Sure, and then Heather.
Okay. I guess the question is, what's the best time to have professional development? Because I'm hearing a couple of different things on like when it's nice to have the break, but in terms of what is the time when is that time needed? I could imagine looking at this thinking, oh, well, you could even take an extra day over the MEA break if the professional development is really better done in October, or is December really the best time to do the professional development days? As a parent, I'm with you kind of on the fall, and then the spring often looks like a lot of weeks in a row, but then professional development not so useful like in the beginning of May. So yeah. Is there a kind of balancing point there?
I would say listening to teachers and our professional development providers who've done this for years, the answer is regular PD interspersed throughout the year, professionally connected to what you're going to be doing. So what that would mean would be, boy, if we could just have regular job embedded PD that kind of was just in time and moving through the year. So we'd have, something during opening week, and then something, in the fall, and then something in the winter, and then something in the spring, because, what you're doing all year long is different. And there are themes like culturally relevant pedagogy. But then there's also other things that are like, we need to let you know about this and how to do this better. And so now there's more, so I would say more technical things, and then some more adaptive things that get trained on. And we have to, and the kids keep coming. So the hard part in a teacher year is, how do you do that and then have a coherent school year?
So
we'll kind of piggyback.
So.
Sorry. So this is Heather, and my question is kind of piggybacking off of both of those. I noticed that September 30th is a professional development for secondary, at least. So that's pretty quick after that to be having another PD, but I don't know, maybe you're just thinking about elementary. And then what does the contract say about those 2 days over MEA?
The contract's silent on those 2 days over MEA, so we don't have any contractual obligation. If the school board held school on MEA, it would be a school day.
Okay.
The reason, so that September 30th could just as easily be October 7th, for example. But what we're trying to do is get elementary conferences earlier. And so the elementary has conferences on that day, and then the secondary has professional development. And then if you look on the November 4th day, the secondary has grading and reporting that day, and elementary has PD at the end of that first quarter.
Yeah, so it just seems like a lot of PD kind of close in that area. It was my point.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we could spread it out as you suggested in a different place.
There wouldn't be anything that would be illegal about having elementary conferences on September 30th and having secondary come to school, and then maybe having a secondary PD day on the 2nd. I just remember from years of doing this that elementary and middle schools don't like to have the secondary out of school when the elementary is in school, because the secondary kids have a tendency to show up at the middle school and say hi to teachers and people, and so it but that's, you know, that's old memories that I haven't checked back on for a while. So we tend to try to keep those together for families. So if you have a high schooler, a secondary, and an elementary student, you know, your day off is the same, and you're not disrupted on 2 different days. And for the, you know, for the families where the secondary student is, you know, let's say, you know, I have a high school kid watching their younger siblings that day, you know, it tends to work better than when we put them on different days.
Since everybody's making a comment, I'll make one more comment too. And just I'll just throw out there too that I'm sure that I know that one of the things you do is look at other districts too and see what they're doing, especially in terms of MEA, because not that we have to follow other districts, but I know that sometimes that creates a community expectation, or, you know, what people might be trying to plan for. People have it in their mind that they can do MEA for vacation time and stuff. And after we get through this pandemic, I don't know if there's going to be this explosion of people trying to book trips every single chance that they get. But I'm sure that will be something that you'll be looking at. It's just continuing to see what the trends are of other districts and giving that some consideration too.
Yeah, that is a good point. And, you know, while many of our neighboring school districts have shortened the winter break from 10 days to something less than 10 days, many of them continue to have the 2-day MEA, and it's just a Minnesota tradition. And you wouldn't find that in North Dakota, for example, but you find it here. And so since our teachers may have, you know, live in other districts and their kids are off, then that would also create a childcare issue for our own staff. So we do have to watch the neighbors on that as well.
And I grew up in Illinois, and I taught in Illinois, and when I moved up here and I said, what's this MEA weekend? What is everybody doing? It sort of baffled my mind. And I'm like, really? That's how it works up here. Huh,
it works up here.
Forget I said anything about professional development on MEA. Let's just ignore that. Move on. All right. Anything else?
Nothing from me.
Thank you very much, Rick. All right, next, Director of Business Services, Patricia Magnuson, will talk to us about the budget and levy certification. I think that, Rick, the budget conversations may bump calendar talks out of first place for the most fun school board discussion topics.
Thank you, Chair Tombeck, members of the board, and Superintendent Osai. I'm glad to be here tonight to talk about this very exciting topic, the budget. What you're looking at right now, can you see my screen? I think I've got it. Okay, so you're looking at a really small version of the timeline. I just kind of want to show you how this star is inching its way down through the timeline, but just to show you how relatively early we are in the ultimate process of adopting the budget for fiscal year 22. So where we're at today, we're still in this data gathering phase. And shortly we'll be here at December 14th, really closing up the last pieces of the puzzle as we gather data to begin next year's budget. So I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit so you can see what we're actually doing. We did meet again with Finance Advisory Committee last week, had a rich discussion about enrollment and budget assumptions, and I'm so thankful for that growing committee and the work they're doing. And just so the board knows, we've adopted thought partners, so we've been challenged to find someone who does work like we do or exists in the school district like we do, like as a parent or as a student who is different from us racially, and then have a conversation so that we can begin to expand the conversation about this really exciting topic. So that's been interesting to see how that's developing. And we are going to be doing racial equity training with our equity coaches. That is now scheduled for December 7th. So that will be another change for Finance Advisory Committee this year to really racialize the work that we're doing. So back to this timeline. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some preliminary financial results. We generally would be doing the audit report tonight, but because of all of the work that has to be done via distance, just timelines got behind for audits across the state. So we're just working through the final materials on that. And I want to give you a little preliminary information for the Truth and Taxation meeting, so that when we come to the December 14th Truth and Taxation hearing, you're prepared with the information we're going to present, and then we can adopt and certify the levy that same night. So tonight there's no action item expected of the board, but we're prepping for you to see the audit results in December and certify the final levy. And then we'll be able to start preparing the budget so that it can be approved. I want to just show you also, this is a preliminary version of what will be ultimately our fund balances this is the information you will be getting from our partner, Jim Eichten at MMKR, our audit firm. We do know that there's one last little bitty entry that we're doing in the unassigned general fund and also in our other post-employment benefits trust. So this is fairly final, very similar to the results that we shared with you at the end of October. But as we work through the final parts of the audit, that we expect that last year will have ended with an 18.51% unreserved unassigned fund balance. Just wanting to remind the board about that. And that's an important part because we start building this year's mid-year budget off of last year's ending balance, which also impacts the budget that we would want to propose for the following year in order to keep our fund balances intact. So that's just a little bit of background about where we're heading in the budget preparation process. So now I'm just going to jump into the tax levy. Not much has changed since the board set the preliminary levy back in September, but I want to just take you through that because you probably haven't been living in it like we have been in the business office. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is to just preview the Pay 21 tax levy for the public schools so that you can be prepared for December 14th. Just as a reminder, the big picture of the tax levy, we levy property taxes for the school district of about a little over $33 million. The majority of that tax levy takes place in the general fund, almost 60%. Are formulas that generate tax levy revenue in the general fund. The next biggest portion, of course, is debt service. The majority of that being voter approved debt service for bond issues. And then the final piece is a little bit of a tax levy in the community service fund. And as far as a dollar amount, here's how that table looks. And what you're looking at here is over here on the leftmost number column is the preliminary Pay 21 levy. So that's taxes, property taxes that will be levied next year, comparing them to this year's property taxes. And you can see that it's a very small increase overall, $384,000, 1.17%. That's a little less than what we had talked about back in September as we worked through the final formulas in all of these levies. So this is a lot of detail, but what I want to point out here is different kinds of levies, all the different formulas that make up tax levies, and then just how many line items there are that make up the tax levy. So the items that are highlighted are just to point out the different types of levies that are in place. So for instance, this operating referendum is the biggest line item in the tax levy and is voter approved. And this line item is going down because we had a declining enrollment that we're trying to foreshadow so that we don't have a big drop in our tax levy in coming years. So that's partially prepping for that decline in enrollment that we're seeing this year. So that's one kind of formula. It's voter approved and it's based on student enrollment. Then the next highlighted item is the capital project referendum. I highlighted that because it's another voter approved item. That's the technical term for the levy, but it's known also as our technology levy. And that's also voter approved, but it's based on the property values in the district. So the formula that the voters approved takes a percentage of property values. And even though we're in some difficult financial times, valuations of properties, both business, commercial, industrial, and home values continue to rise. So that formula that's approved by our voters is attached to those rising valuations. So that tax levy is actually going up according to the formula the voters approved. And then there's a few other ones. Operating capital is interesting. Not much is really changing for operating capital, but the state legislature shifted the equalization factor, meaning the amount of that formula we get through tax levy has gone up this year. All that means is the state aid part has gone down. So this is a levy that's going up just by that shift in the way that formula is allocated. And then long-term facility maintenance is a good example of just a board-approved levy. So we brought forward a 10-year deferred maintenance plan, and the board approved as part of that a pay-as-you-go levy, or about $1 million a year that we levy. That's gone down a little bit, and you'll see the offset in debt service for that. So that's just the general fund. So that fund is going down by 2.86%, driven mostly by that operating referendum decline. And then in community service fund, I highlighted a couple. The early childhood levy is one that's a whole different kind of formula. It's based on the number of 0 to 4-year-olds that we estimate are living in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And we just had a small change in that estimate. So just a really small increase in that dollar amount. So they don't have to be attending anywhere. They just have to live in St. Louis Park Public Schools. School-age childcare is the rare example of a levy that's based solely on what we spend. And it's a backwards-looking levy, so we know exactly what the dollar amounts are. And what this is the additional costs associated with serving students with special needs with an IEP or an individual education program, a student with disabilities in our Kids Place or school-age childcare program. So those costs have gone up just a little bit depending on the number of students with disabilities or the types of services that they require. This occurred to me this afternoon that this might be confused with the critical care that we're providing right now in the district for families of Tier 1 service workers in our community, but this is not that. This is normal run-of-the-mill school-age childcare for students with disabilities, and this levy has been around for years. And then the last fund is the debt service fund, and really this is a sort of run-of-the-mill levy because once the debt service is set in place, when the voters approve a bond issue or the board approves a bond issue for long-term facility maintenance, for instance, those principal and interest, like our mortgage, principal and interest payments stay in place. We refinance them often as we can to take advantage of lowering interest rates when we can. But this is a levy that stays in place via voter approval, and it looks very similar, or it looks as we expected every year. We try to plan for our debt service payments and other facilities levies to keep the tax impact flat. And so you'll see this increase that we knew was coming because it's a set schedule was offset by a declining general fund levy for long-term facility maintenance because we want to keep all those items flat. So in total, the levy is going up by $920,000 or 7.76%. And this is just within the base of the debt service fund. So in total, we're only going up by 1.17% for all funds. But now we know a lot more about the tax rates for next year. So our total levy, so what I have here, it's a little equation. It's a numerator and a denominator. So our total levy, the numerator, that dollar amount of 33 million is only up by 1.17%. The denominator, the bottom of the equation, property values are going up by 6 to 7%. So the result, if you have you're going to end up with a declining tax rate, which is what we're going to be having. We have a declining tax rate for school taxes, for property taxes payable in 2021. And this looks like a lot, and I'm just going to walk you through what we have here. So, you know, these three columns are taxes payable next year in 2021. The middle column is taxes payable in 2020, and the difference is just that, the difference. So you can see this ties back to what we had first said in our three funds. The total tax is 33,371,000. And so that is an increase of 1.17% from last year, $384,000. So that's the numerator. And this is the total property values. For property taxes, the valuations are calculated in a couple of ways. We can talk sometime about the details of that, or you can read about it online, but basically the market value of properties in St. Louis Park, taxable properties, is $7 billion. And there's another tax capacity calculation, but the important thing is to know that those two things are both rising by nearly 6% and over 6%. So there's your numerator and denominator, and the upshot of this story is that tax rates are declining for school, for St. Louis Park Public Schools taxes for next year. And this is what it might look like on homes at these three property values. So and what we're assuming here is that the valuation of the property has not changed. If we just want to show you the impact of the tax rate. So on a $300,000 home, if the property valuation has not changed, their school taxes should go down by about $58.12. Now I know Hennepin County did get their property tax statements sent out, so those should have been in homes by now. So that's what we're looking at, a declining school tax. So as the timeline for just the tax levy, we're nearing the end. Those parcel specific notices have to be out by November 24th. I think they went out like on November 11th. So they've been in folks' hands for a week or so. But we'll be back on December 14th to walk our community through what we have to talk about is the tax levy itself would be very similar to this, but with a lot more detail because we also have to talk about the budget. And then more specific reasons about increases in taxes. And our budget we will be discussing is the current year's budget because we're in the middle of a budget year. So the board will then be asked to certify that levy that same night on December 14th. So just a reminder of the three funds, the amount that we're levying within each fund, and that's the dollar increase. So we'll be back on December 14th. This was just a preview for tonight.
Okay, thank you for the preview. Patricia, who has questions or comments on this?
I have a comment and a question. This is Laura McClendon.
Yeah.
Patricia, I'd like to first thank you for your work with the Financial Advisory Committee. I know that last time you shared that there was an increase in the number of students that were on compared to last year, which is always great to hear. And then for embracing the thought partners and embracing the racial equity work, because a lot of times we know that our money goes where our values are. And so you know, working with our budget and making it so accessible to a lot of us that I have no background in finance. So I appreciate both of those things that you are doing and embracing. And my specific question is, if you are able to go back, I believe it was slide 5, it says pay 2021 general fund. Right there. That very top line that you said is based on declining enrollment. And so trying to, you know, plan for that. If the student enrollment is as is not as low as projected, the money still follows the kids. So would we see an increase, or would we be stuck with whatever it is that we projected?
Yes, great question. For student enrollment-based tax levies and really state aid of any kind, the funding formula is forgiving. So what would happen, so if we end up with a higher in student enrollment this year than we thought for some reason, we'd have a spike in the levy next year because there's always an adjustment that looks back. So what we tried to do this year is because what happens is we had to estimate the enrollment for this year during last year's tax levy. We overestimated. And what I didn't want to do is have taxes flailing around. So we drove our enrollment number down this year so the tax levy would decline so that we don't have another artificial dip next year. Does that make sense? So it always corrects itself, I guess, is the bottom line.
Okay, that answers. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I wanted to show off my proposed levies and taxes statement, which did come, I think, at least a week ago. So I wanted to let Patricia know these are out in St. Louis Park. And for those of you who are looking and you want to give input on your proposed taxes and levies, all of those meetings are listed here on the right-hand side. I know I'm probably backwards for everybody, but on the right-hand side, I can see the county one is the first one on December 1st, City of St. Louis Park on December 7th, Metro Special Taxing District on December 9th, and then our meeting is on December 14th at 6 p.m. That's our truth and taxation hearing where we're going to go over a lot of what Patricia just went over and more in detail, and also take questions and comments on at that meeting. So December 14th at 6 p.m. And I was looking at, I always like to follow along because I think it helps me put the levy conversation into concrete terms. And so, Patricia, I noticed that my tax bill for the school is projected to go up $5 and I don't know, 60 cents or something like that. So what that means is that the value of my home went up about the same as the value of the average home, right?
Right. That's right. Exactly.
The tax rate went down, but my amount is going up, but really it's basically zero.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Well, look for this in your mailbox, and that will tell you what you need to know.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, again, thank you, Patricia, and we'll talk about this again on December 14th. Again, Truth and Taxation meeting is at 6 p.m. It will be done virtually, and Zoom links and everything and will be available on the district's website, and we'll probably stream via YouTube that evening as well. So thank you.
I have a question about that, Mary.
Sure.
Because there has to be a public comment component. So how does that mechanism work in the Zoom format?
We will work with Sarah Thompson and Flower Katrina so that people, maybe we could do raised hands or something. I mean, there's lots of options to do it via Zoom. Obviously, if you're going to be watching it via YouTube, you are just going to be watching. And there wouldn't be the opportunity via YouTube to ask questions or make comments, but we will, that will be a capability we'll obviously be able to have, we need to have legally, right, Patricia? Right, so we can do that via, and so we'll be putting up, we'll make sure to put up detailed instructions. Thanks for highlighting that, Karen. Put up detailed instructions on the district's website about how people can participate, raise hands, whatever, and we'll certainly go over that at the beginning of the meeting as well. Okay. Great. Next up is the school board listening session recap. The school board held a listening session last Monday evening, And Colin Cox and Ken Morrison were able to be there on behalf of the 7 of us. Again, all 7 of us could not be there due to the requirements of open meeting law, or the limitations in that case of open meeting law. So Colin is going to chat with us this evening about what he heard and what the concerns of our community are.
Yep.
Go ahead, Colin.
Yep. The listening session was hosted by and led by Director Morrison, and I participated as well. I think this is our first ever virtual listening session. I don't know if that's something to celebrate, but I think I'm glad that we were able to have this event.
We did have a virtual one before.
Last
year. Yeah, sorry, I was at that one.
All
you
right.
weren't there, but yes.
Regardless, it was successful. We had about 24 people, I think, on the call at peak, and I didn't really see who all those people were. But we heard from about 7 different people, and lots of different people, but many, I would say there were a few that stood out to me that were parents of kindergartners in particular, and including some that were just brand new to the district in terms of this is their first year. So it was good to see them participating, good to have everybody participating in it. And I think we heard a lot of things that similar to what Superintendent Osai had talked about in the listening sessions that he's held, and some other things that we've talked about at various other times. But I think I'll run down just a relatively quick list of what I call comments and themes. Some things were more like prevalent themes that we heard, and some were just more one-off comments from one person. And one of the themes that we heard were some concerns or lack of clarity about changes in things in the curriculum, especially in the area of math. I'm hearing a little bit more about the math changes, particularly at that 5+ level. And whether or not we're providing enough challenge or enrichment for students who are exceeding in a content area. So there was a question about the way that I saw it was maybe we've heard about things at the board level, but maybe that's not trickling down quite yet to some of the parents. And so maybe there's some ability to do some broader parent communication about the curriculum efforts. You know, some of the questions that parents were having are teachers having to teach too many levels? They, you know, I don't know if they understand how we're doing things and how we're sort of adjusting for different learning levels. Are kids getting access to the same kind of challenge that they might have gotten in, say, like a 5+ or a 6+ math class, or is it all kind of watered down? Is our science challenging enough? So it was just sort of like basic questions, things that I think we've talked about, but it still are kind of leaving parents wondering what's going on. There was a remark about whether or not we could get the high school science into the high school science teacher in the elementary classroom back. And another comment related to challenges and students being in distance too long and classes being too short, I think, in our current learning situation. So those were all kind of things about just overall curriculum. Related to that somewhat, there was a comment, somebody used the phrase gifted and talented, and somebody else reacted to that and said, let's get away from that, which I think is something that we've talked about at a board too, level about how we could talk about that differently. There was one comment from someone who was talking about, let's make sure that if we have to look at budget cuts coming up, that we put everything on the table, and even asked questions like, what if we got rid of IB? Does that have a cost saving? Are we administration heavy? And some questions related to that. There was one comment that was about kids place communications and whether some of the information they got seemed sort of confusing or inconsistent or sort of different than what they might be hearing from another program. And that created a little bit of confusion from them. We also heard from a member of the newly renamed Feeds program. I think they were SLP Seeds. And they spoke about some of their upcoming efforts and opportunities, and about an opportunity maybe with working with a local engineering firm that's moving its headquarters here to SLP, and some opportunities that might some things that we might think about in terms of the schools, I think, and perhaps in tapping into that. And then I think maybe the most encouraging kind of comment that I heard, or theme that I had heard out of the group, was, what are some of the ways that parents can help in our current situation? And we had one of our kindergarten teachers say, could I bring kids together? Could I have people in my house? And I think we were all like, we weren't giving advice, we're there to listen. But I think our idea was still that energy of the parents saying, how can I be helpful in this situation? And I think they were, talking about what are the ways that we could help groups or help the teachers, or how do we go about getting coordinating some of that help for things that are going on as parents, if parents do have the capacity. There was another comment from a parent that was saying, are we aware of any time management tools that we could sort of push out to people to help the kids, help parents focus, help their kids focus? And I've heard this sort of separately from some other people, some other parents saying, outside of the session, that how do we go about actually helping our kids manage their days better? And are there some tools, and could we be promoting some of those and spreading some of those things out? So really robust conversation. We managed to get it all in an hour, and people were really great about participating. It was really good to hear, and that's what we tried to do, is focus on hearing. And so that's why we bring back a lot of these comments and themes to you all as just things for people to process, to think about, and think about how they can get out. We tried not to be the answer people in the situation, as more as just sort of listening and thinking about how some of this information could be shared. So that's my rundown of of the second virtual listening session that we've had as a board.
Thank you to both you and Ken for being there, and for people for coming and raising their questions and concerns. Does any of us have any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. Great. Thanks again, Colin. We will be following up on these items. And as a reminder to folks, I think that we have our next listening session in April. It'll be sometime this spring.
And I did remind them of our new email too. So
yeah, you want to go ahead and remind the watchers about that?
I believe and somebody may have to remind me, but I knew it at the time. It's just school board at SLP schools, I believe, right? And the benefit of that, as I've been understand it, is instead of putting in 8 different emails and making sure that you've spelled Cox correctly or whatever, you can just put in SLP schools or school board at SLP schools, and when you want to message the entire school board.
Correct. And I want to add about the email, though, that suggestion came from a parent who reached out to us and told us that would be an easier way to communicate with us. And so that was a great idea, and we made that happen. Try and do that whenever possible.
Then Mary, the next listening session is Tuesday, February 16th at 6:30.
February 16th. Thank you very much, Karen. Maureen will be reminding folks of that as we get closer. Okay, next, we're going to do some second readings of policies. Those policies are 410, family and medical leave, 413, harassment and violence with procedures attached, 414, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse, and 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults. And we did go over these last meeting, or I'm sorry, Ann Casey, why don't you walk us through this again?
Oh, you were doing it. We talked about these the last meeting. I asked if anybody wanted to pull anything for the policy committee to review, and I did not hear, it was crickets. So as I mentioned last time, these are largely required. I want to make sure that we understand the distinction between policies that are statutorily required and policies with really the language is we can't change it because it's state law or federal law, and these policies are largely dictated by state and federal laws. So there's not a whole lot of changes that we can do to them. 410 family and medical leave policy we saw last year. In the last couple of years, I think the only change we've made to this policy is to bring it in line with our gender inclusion policy, just in definitions and language, and just making sure we were using gender inclusive terms for people. 413, harassment and violence. This, we also saw this, these are annual review policies. We saw this last September. And at some point in the last few years, this was updated just in particular in the purpose statement, just to kind of give a statement of our philosophy. The purpose of this policy is to help create a safe and nurturing environment that energizes the spirit of students and employees, and to maintain a learning and working environment that is free from harassment and violence. So I just wanted to point, I didn't want to just say, these are all statutory and therefore it feels like they're not important, because they're really super important policies. So I wanted to say a little bit about each one. That is the harassment and violence policy. The procedures are here. Sorry, I'm scrolling and it's taking a second. There's a lot of procedures. And then 414, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse. Again, this one is really lots of requirements that we have no really ability or desire to change. That it's a a super important policy for us, and nothing that we'd want to really mess with. And same for 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults. So if there are any questions, these are all annual review policies. So we see these every year by law and by policy, with largely required language. And I know Rick last time said that he didn't have anything to change. We had looked through the MSBA red lines and there wasn't anything new between last time and this time.
I have a quick question, and maybe this might be better answered by Superintendent Osai or Rick Cryer. Specifically looking at like 413, which is harassment and violence, and 414, mandated reporting. Those are policies that like teachers are informed and review each year also, correct?
Correct. That's part of our annual training, and in each of the schools, we remind people of their responsibilities.
Okay, thank you.
I had a similar question that Laura did, but that she just covered. But I noticed I think I'm trying to look at things online using our software here, and I think it's in 413. There just looked to be like a couple of grammatical things, like I'm trying to find it, but there's like something in there where it's like for each building or something, and it's capitalized, and it looks like it's a little sentence on its own or something like that. I think it's meant to have something else there. I think it's 413 in the reporting procedures, D and G, G. Yeah, I think G or something like that, where just at the beginning of it, it looks a little confusing. So
we'll take a look at that.
Get that straightened up, or it's like, it says in each building period, each school building period, with capitals there.
I see what you're talking about, Colin. Thanks for bringing that forward. Since that's in the procedures, it doesn't really, we don't have to make any amendments to change this right now for the purposes of the second reading tonight and on the action agenda. But let's make a note of that to get that to Flower for the procedures.
And Chair Tembeck, if I could also add a response to Clerk McClendon's question regarding training, is that okay? I appreciate that question, and as Mr. Cryer outlined, certainly we have annual expectations for policy review, but I want to just mention that it's not as simple as just having staff read the policy and move on. We utilize a system called Safe Schools, which I believe a lot of school districts use, but it requires each employee to go through pretty extensive modules connected to each policy, where they have to answer several questions connected to the policy and get a proficient score in order to be able to move forward. And as many of you have experienced these types of modules, if an employee doesn't demonstrate proficiency in that particular policy area, they have to go back and along with the calendar, Rick has the great fortune of monitoring and keeping track of all of those safe school scores and human resources as well. So I think, Rick, I covered that, but if not, please correct anything I've said.
We do cover the material and policies and training, and as I said, that at the beginning of the year, while staff is getting a lot of stuff coming in the door each year, they also get a specific school kind of handbook or manual that goes over responsibilities. We're also, as we're updating some of our capabilities and software and human resources, we're bringing on board something called Power School Records, and we'll be able to push out handbook changes to each employee as the board approves new policies, to just make sure that they've seen the latest copy, and they have to acknowledge that they've read it and understand it.
I have a question related to that, Rick. Is that also going to be connected to our student handbooks? Because 413 harassment and violence is also in the middle school handbook and the high school handbook. What I like about the high school handbook, they have the live link to the actual policy. At the middle school, you see what the policy is, but you have to go digging farther to know where to go to actually read the language policy that we're expecting our students to be aware of, and our parents and guardians in terms of action. And this is pertinent right now because we had a Zoom bombing incident with one of our high school teachers last week, and the incident is under investigation, and that policy 413 is applicable in terms of what was done to our teacher by a student. So getting this a little more finely tuned and usable is really important, especially as I anticipate we're probably going to have more distance learning requirements throughout this year.
Thanks for that observation. Yeah, while I believe that having a short paragraph paraphrasing the main points is good, you should typically insert the link to the actual policy, underneath it. So we'll talk to the middle school about, in their next version.
Anyone else? Any other questions on any of these policies before we see them on the action agenda? Okay, thanks, Anne. All right, moving on to the action agenda. Sorry, my meeting disappeared. First, we've got the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull off the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing or hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Anne.
Second by Karen.
Thanks, Karen. Laura?
Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon, aye.
Passes 6-0. Thank you. Next, on to the action agenda. It is recommended that the school board approves the second reading of policies 410, 413, 414, and 415 as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Laura?
I'll second.
Okay. You can give it to me. I never show up as getting to make motions.
Okay. Roll call. Sorry. Mary Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
excuse me, Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
and Laura McClendon, aye.
Okay, that passes. Those readings pass 6-0 as well. All right, communications and transmittals. Who has something for us this evening?
I do, Heather.
Great. Thanks, Heather.
So I represent the board on the St. Louis Park Public Schools and Community Foundation Board. And I just want to put a plug for their, the mission is to raise funds to support education or programming in the schools, as well as out in the community, or the community at large programming. And one of the ways that they're fundraising this year is a mask fundraiser. And if you buy one, then one will be donated to a family in need out in the community. So if you are interested or able to buy a mask, you can go to slppsf.org and get it online.
Thank you. The Townbacks have 5 masks coming their way.
Awesome.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I will just end the evening by saying that we know that this has been a little bit of a quieter couple of weeks, because there's been a little bit more news of non-activity. So as Superintendent Osai was describing in a superintendent's report, a lot of other things have been quieted down and canceled. And I know a lot of people are canceling their plans with their families over the next week. And I just wanted to implore our community, the sooner, the more we all comply and the more we all stay home and mask up and stay safe, the sooner our students get to go back into their buildings. We have had some families who have mentioned to us, about Europe. The kids in the UK are able to go to school, and the kids in other countries are able to go to school. And I want to stress that the reason that that's been happening is because the rest of the countries have ostensibly shut down. They have shut down so that kids can go to school. And we haven't done that in this country. And so it's up to us individually to do our part so that the infection rates can decrease, so that our students can get back in their buildings. I know our teachers want to be back in there. They want to be back in front of their kids. Parents want to send their kids back into schools. So we really are all in this together right now. And it's up to all of us to make this happen so that we can get back to some semblance of normal life here, so that our students can be in their classroom learning where we all want them to be. So with that, have a safe and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. My colleagues on the board and in the cabinet, everybody as well. Hope you can find some joy and peace and gratitude over the next week. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Karen.
Moved by Karen.
Second by Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
Karen
Laura.
Tomback,
Aye.
Ann Casey,
Aye.
Karen Waters,
Aye.
Heather Wilsey,
Aye.
Colin Cox,
Aye.
Laura McClendon. Aye.
All right, passes